Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 97 of the Not Joanna Eggs podcast. This week, Robin and myself are joined by stop-motion animator and friend of the show, Kat Messing, as we talk about the finale of Bojack Horseman Season 6, Part 2. Be forewarned, this show is very long, so this is well over an hour, but just factor that in when you're listening to it. We had a great time talking about it, but it's just given the subject matter of the show, it's very dense, so, please know that going in, and that obviously since we're talking about the end of the series, there's going to be spoilers galore, so be careful with that. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find Kat, you can find her on Instagram via @cat.messing, or you can look for her website, which is catmessing.com. Robin and myself, our handles are @lobster_writer on Twitter and @TCTroush, respectively. I hope you guys enjoy this one, and this thing has been a behemoth to edit, so I hope that you guys enjoy it. So take care. Thanks for listening. Bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Not Joanna Eggs podcast. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Robin.
And we have a guest with us who's returning for the second part of Bojack Horseman Season 6. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Kat. I'm Kat Messing.
Yes, you are Kat Messing. And they're always going to be Kat Messing in our hearts.
I hope so.
Never change. But no. So, as if you had listened to our previous episode where we talked about season 6 of BoJack Horseman, they, as the series has ended at this point, they split season 6 into 2 parts. So the first part had come out slightly before Halloween, I believe, and then this second half just came out on January 31st. So we are talking about it. If you have not caught up with the entire series, be forewarned that this is just spoilers galore. It's inevitable. We have to do that. So, yeah. So, if you have not seen the show up to this point, do not listen to this episode. Watch the series first, then come back to it. Or if you don't care about spoilers, then keep listening. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever your jam is.
You'll probably need a day in between finishing the show and a day before you listen to this podcast just to process.
Just to really just like sit and stew about what just happened.
Yeah,
like,
just rocking back and forth in the shower, questioning every decision.
Yeah, it's...
Man, I had a much different relationship to the show than y'all did.
I had both. Mostly mine was anger. Like, a lot of it was just anger and frustration.
Well, everybody that got...
For some of the characters, not everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think people got happy endings who deserved it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, and trust me, we will get into that. So, just due to the nature of how dense the these 2 season halves were, we'll do a really brief just catch up of what happened in the last season, and then we're going to structure it going character by character, just because it's a lot easier to get into, and clearly one character is going to be dominating the entire conversation.
And this way we won't forget Judah again.
No, I felt like such a dick at the end of it. I was like, no, we forgot fucking Judah.
He's so good.
I was so angry. Like, when I went back through it, I was like, oh my God, we forgot to talk about Judah. And I will never forget him again. So essentially what had happened was at the tail end of season 6, part 1, we saw the recap episode of Bojack taking his trips to go visit a bunch of relatives and friends and all that. And then, of course, all the fallout that was happening with Hollyhock and Gina and Kelsey Jennings, who was also involved with that too, like how she was not able to get the bigger directing jobs that she wanted, and a lot of it all just kind of had to do with all these people that Bojack had basically kind of fucked their lives up, or at least to an extent, like left enough emotional or mental damage. So it's just
left his negative.
So then we have this, so then we have the start of Bojack starting at Wesleyan and following up with Diane now living in Chicago, which, and also Mr. Peanut Butter working on Birthday Dad, which honestly sounds like the best version of Quantum Leap I could think of. like Quantum Leap, but everyone is based around birthdays. And let's see, and also Princess Carolyn, who had since been she had finished the assistant strike that was going on, and she was like, oh, we should actually not treat them like garbage. and her getting used to being a mom and being more acquainted with taking care of Ruthie, and Todd just being his Todd self, and finally connecting with a woman named Maud, who is the bunny that worked at the airport at the Cinnabunny.
The Cinnabunny.
Which is very, very cute.
I love
let's
her.
See. She's adorable.
Yes.
So let's start off with Todd first, because he has kind of an arc, but obviously they were running out of time when it came to getting into some of his stuff.
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, his was more cut and dry than anybody else's. I mean, it was they added that sort of deeper twist with his relationship to his mother and being a Chavez.
And also him being able to enlist esteemed character actress Margot Martindale again.
I was gonna say, I think that
God,
the main point of his final arc was just to give Margot a final curtain call on that.
Yeah,
I think you're probably right, because I think like Todd as a character, he's like those jackets that like rain just falls right off of it.
He's like a duck; water just rolls off of his back.
Right.
Yeah, like 100%, like everything. So I think it was like his arc does resolve his like issues, but those issues, to me at least, really only seem to come to be a thing in the last like half season. And even then, it's kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say like low stakes, but it definitely isn't the same sort of like intensity that we're used to.
Also, his mom was really kind of a non-character up to that point. Like, she just sort of like, they introduce it as being kind of a conflict, but we don't even really understand like the whole thing of like, I guess it was a pride thing for her not wanting to contact him or vice versa. But I don't know, because it seems like when you really see the two of them together, they seem to both have the same kind of like youthful energy about them. And Todd has always kind of had this latent entrepreneurial spirit, and I think that after he was kicked out, that really did kind of flourish in his 20s.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I thought that the reason that she didn't come down to dinner was that she was dead and that his stepdad was covering for it.
I was so terrified that was going to be the case.
But I think it would have been too dark,
right.
because then just be like, look, Todd, this is what happens when you don't get closure by talking to the people that are in your life. But at the same time, like, she did kick him out, so maybe he would just be completely emotionally devoid.
Yeah, I think they wouldn't...
It would be too dark for him specifically,
Yeah,
too.
I think you're right. I think it would work for it works well for, like, Bojack or someone else, but not so much for Todd.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also just sort of like if it had been that way, it would be sort of like a pointless nihilism where they're like, oh, okay, all right, like what's to be gained by just taking this to be dark for dark's sake. Although it was a little weird for me, like understanding like the kind of not so much low stakes, but it's just like oh, I guess they're friends now, and that's kind of unsettling, but not in a way that I'm really like, oh, this is really meaty emotional unpacking that's going on here. So it was more abrupt than anything, really, but at the same time it's like we only got to know her for like maybe an episode and a half, so it's not shocking. You know, like we'd have roughly the same emotional stakes with her as like Sharona the makeup lady, where it's like you can still kind of see some of her rationale for certain things, but I don't know. I did think that it was funny that she was basically forced to ransom 100 Frito pies to release time. Because I made Frito pie not too long ago, and I'm like, oh damn, that's a pretty good deal. Because like it takes a lot of Fritos to make that kind of Frito pie. Margot is so funny. I loved. She's such a treasure. That redeemed everything else. I was like, yes, all right. If it wasn't that I was such a convincing character actress. What I want to know is that if she ever does public events now, if she just has headshots that say esteemed character actress Margot Martindale.
God, I hope so.
Because like most people that like if they would see her on the street, they'd just be like, oh my God, it's esteemed character actress Margot Martindale. Probably from the show or from any number of films that she's done. Like Walk Hard, where when I realized that was her in it, I freaked the fuck out.
Oh, same. Well, any time now that I see her in something, I immediately pause it and take a picture to send it to Tracy to say, is that esteemed character actress Margot Martindale? And
then we both go, oh! Like,
it makes me so happy every time.
And then we resume.
And then back to the show.
Because she's in so many things. Like, it's really...
she's
anyway.
like Paul... She's like female answer to Paul Giamatti.
Yeah,
yes.
I know, right?
Just the everyman
so
that's
versatile.
Just great in anything. I did like that Todd and his mom had opposite, what would you call it, a cheek puff? Like they just have that one.
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
like
single
yeah.
dimple.
like they both have like kind of full cheeks and everything, but like
But
his
just on one
is
side.
on.
Yeah, opposite
Yeah,
side.
so Taz is technically on the left side of his face, like it's like camera left or sorry, camera right, and then his mom's is reversed. So
Yeah.
like that was
Yeah.
just like that's just goofy. So
What is it supposed to be? I'm not sure. Is it like a single dimple or let's just?
maybe they both have mumps. I don't know. They just
I
never
don't
got it
think
looked
it's
at.
mumps.
You don't know that.
I said think.
I know. All right, so then after that, let's get into Mr. Peanut Butter, who at that point had been working on Birthday Dad.
Birthday dad.
It's just,
D as in birthday dad.
I don't know why he keeps going back to that same sign company, but God willing, he's probably the only person keeping them in business.
Hollywood. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Hollywood. I died.
And then Princess Carolyn, without dropping a beat, immediately refers to it as like, everyone in Hollywood will be at that one. Like, what?
I love that is just how this world deals with it. They're just like,
Yep.
oh, we lost the D, so now it's Hollywood.
Yeah,
Clearly,
like, there's no questioning
now there's
it.
a
They
B.
just-
It's Hollywood.
And also, I guess no one else thought to buy another one to replace it in the interim. They had to wait until it was returned.
I
Just-
appreciate Todd and Margot Martindale and Mr. Peanut Butter's antics because I feel like they're the kind of the breath of comedic relief that we need
Oh my
in such
God.
the heaviness of everything else. So,
Yeah, because like if everything was just so intense and like like that all the time, it would be kind of exhausting to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Like, yeah, you need that kind of lightness and that kind of silliness with it.
my favorite Mr. Peanut Butterism besides the Hollywood was when he goes on one of his long. Am I a something band from something London in 1972 with a gold record? Because yes.
My favorite one was that
God.
there's a certain point where I think he's talking to Princess Carolyn about how also Pickles has since broken up with Mr. Peanut Butter. They tried to, so he bought Elefante from Bojack because he
God,
was in
yes.
dire straits from money. They turned it into a restaurant called
Yes.
Elefino, and it's Lazy Susans in small plates. So then, like, of course, everyone's food is just spilling all over them all the time.
Hey, there's also Mr. Peanut Butter's face on the menu.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting that part.
Everyone does. It's the funniest thing.
I
Wait,
know.
so did she break it off with him? Because I
She
thought
did.
that they just...
No, it was a totally 80-yard line that was just like off screen. Where like by the time that both he and Todd left Princess Carolyn's office, he's like, and I'm getting a text message, and it appears that we have broken up forever. It's just,
I missed...
that's all they do. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I totally missed
But
that
you knew
part.
it
'cause I
was
kind
coming.
of...
Pickles and Mr. Peanut Butter were just not meant to be together. It's just.
Well, and I think
she's just
especially
too
once-
she's too emotionally immature for him too, and also he's too old to be dating someone as young as she is.
Yeah, he seemed to sort of be at peace with like knowing what was going to happen when he was having that
Yeah.
last conversation with her. But the farce did add a nice backdrop with Paige Sinclair
Oh my god.
Paige
and the
Sinclair and
tension
Max.
that was rife between her and her reporting partner. Was it Max Banks? Thanks,
Yeah,
Banks.
yeah, yeah. Oh god, like it's just something about like I can see how some people don't like the whole screwball comedy or transatlantic thing, but I think that
I
they're
love
wrong
it.
because I thought they were hilarious.
My favorite
Oh, I
is
thought they
like,
were
why do you
great.
speak like this? We're from Fresno.
Yeah, we're from
I
because we don't even know how old Paige is, but she can't be older than like her late 20s,
No,
early 30s,
she's-
whatever.
yeah. Oh,
but
God,
she's
no.
just talking because she likes the transatlantic accent.
She's a
Like I love
Yes.
that.
bride to be. Yeah.
Oh poop! A scoop's flown the coop.
I loved that. I loved it so
Just
much. I
all
screamed
of
at the television, and I actually screamed out, "Tracy!" and you weren't there.
Oh Jesus Christ! Oh yeah, I mean like it's I like that they had to like keep trying to play up the whole like romantic tension between the two of them, even though it's just like we don't really know them that well, so
Right.
whatever it is,
Yes.
it's gonna feel contrived. But
And she
whatever.
super dumps him at the end, where she's just like, "Oh, of course you do. I'm Paige Sinclair. Ta-ta!" And then
I'm Paige Sinclair.
This is another thing where sorry, just getting back to Mr. Peanut Butter is when he's describing to Princess Carolyn how sad he is at the house now since Pickles had left.
Oh my God.
Like he says I went to go to the doctor to try to talk to him about how to feel better, and the doctor's like, I can recommend this meme to you. It's called Sad Dog, and he says, but doctor, I am sad.
I
sad
am
dog.
sad
And
dog.
I love a Pagliacci reference.
I was gonna
They
say
did.
peanut butter Pagliacci.
Yeah,
That destroyed me.
peanut butter Gliacci. I don't know.
Although Mr. Peanut Butter was similar to Todd's story in that where it's like, okay, like it's kind of wrapped up, but it doesn't really go out with a bang. Like he's working on
Not
himself,
really.
developing more self-confidence and not needing to attach himself to a relationship for self-worth. But I don't know, like there wasn't really like a bang.
Yeah, there was no extreme thing, but he did eventually
No.
have Bojack living with him,
Right.
which was like kind of all he ever really wanted, which is sad.
Oh,
But, you know,
absolutely.
it's there.
Yeah, but it's definitely, I agree, it's more of a whisper than a bang, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that it works really well for Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter just because of the way those characters are.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's so much about their lives in general that kind of just keep them naturally going, where it's like Mr. Peanut Butter, like, admittedly, if he had lost his job on Birthday Dad and lost Pickles at the same time, he'd probably be really messed up. But, like, no, like, Birthday Dad is actually doing pretty well.
Well,
So.
Mr. Peanut Butter's just so nice and inherently likable. It seems like he could pretty much bounce back from just about anything. He's like he shares that sort of type of celebrity with Bojack, but not in a, what's the word I'm trying to thinking for, nefarious or
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's kind of mirrored Bojack's success, but he handles all the pressures and stuff a lot better because he just has better coping mechanisms. Like in general,
And
like
he's
he
not
doesn't
an
retreat
asshole,
to the
that
same
too.
stuff that Bojack does. Like, yeah, and Mr. Peanut Butter can be kind of a dick sometimes too, but he's
Oh my
not.
gosh.
He's not as outwardly hateful and cunning as Bojack is.
He's much more like affable and
Yeah,
friendly.
he's just kind of dumb. He's just like a dumb
he
Labrador.
seems to have reasonable human dogman faults
Yeah.
that are just redeemable, you know.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, just I guess we're gonna start veering into like the next territory of I think the next one we should talk about is Princess Carolyn, because PC, my girl,
Ugh.
she got her happy ending. Made me
Yes,
so
she did.
so happy. I was admittedly not totally seeing that one coming, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like it made total sense, you know, like
Oh, yeah.
because like in retrospect, if you go back and look at the like what they were trying to set up with, so basically, PC marries Judah eventually, and because like I guess Judah had sort of had like this sort of running thing with her, like he's just that good of an assistant, but I guess he also had some kind of romantic interest in PC too.
I thought that he was considerably younger than she was. I thought that he was.
Yeah, I also kind of read that.
I think he's in like his mid-30s or something, and PC is probably like what 45, but like that does make her a cougar, which is pretty dope.
I mean, they're certainly compatible with their work-life balance.
You would make my work-life balance even more on pointier. More work.
Right.
Well, I also like that it's just it's a nice contrast because through the course of Bojack Horseman in general, like the way that the characters end up resolving most of their story arcs is that there's some kind of goal that's like set up for them to either achieve or something that they have to get past. And with Princess Carolyn's is that she just had like this inherent need to not want to be helped. Like she did not want someone like there to save her, even though she was so used to taking care of other people. Once she finally kind of allowed that to happen, she saw what a good team she and Judah happened to be. And like Judah would just be like, he just works entirely with her. She doesn't get any of like the pushback and everything.
They're a
like
great team.
Judah is endlessly grateful for being able to work with her and everything. Like
He's anticipatory, right? Like he's intuitive towards what she
he's extremely
needs.
conscientious. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They're a good team. I had, this is a little bit of an aside. I had a moment where just to impact that the show can have just with the characters and things, where they're in the background at one point you could see Ruthie toddling, and I'm like, oh my god, she's growing up so fast. And then you have
Well, like when they're at the wedding and everything, I was
you
like,
have this
Ruthie's
moment where you're-
chasing after the other baby. It was so cute.
and you have this moment where you're like, wait, I just had a very everyday human reaction for an animated porcupine daughter adopted by a pink cat, and you're like, wow, okay, this like it just speaks to the genius of the show writing and how impactful it is.
For sure. And it's also like if you've ever been at like a relative's wedding or something, or like just being at events like that growing up, like it's weird because then sometimes you don't see those people for a while and you're just like, oh my god, like my, you know, like one of like your younger cousins or nieces or nephews have like grown by like 3 years just because you haven't seen them in a while, and like it's really uncanny. You're just like, oh my god, you're in middle school now. Like
It was a really nice touch that they included it in the last Life Goes On Anyway episode.
yeah.
I think I'm going to maybe die / age 10 years the next time I see my nephews, because one of them is now in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that you should just go full birthday dad and then just try to time travel back and just be like, hey, kids, like, well, this is all the stuff you're going to need for college. I don't know.
Just give them a bunch of shit.
Which is still so, but yeah, in terms of thinking of your future self, I'm so glad that she doesn't have to have that future dream come true of her goddaughter or her granddaughter or her niece of herself that never actually existed. Do you from a couple seasons ago how heart-wrenching that was?
I'm really glad with the way that things turn out for PC. And also, Judah's Serenade is just so damn cute.
It's super cute.
It is,
He kind of
actually.
sucks at guitar, but it's so cute. He wrote
Listen,
he wrote a 4-chord pop song. I am not complaining.
He admits he's not great at it.
Yeah, he's like, yes, my band is terrible.
It kind of took me by surprise because I wasn't getting like a super she's into him vibe. I mean, obviously she super cares about him, and then she had that thing where she had to leave work even though it was important for her deadline because she wanted to support her friend. But I didn't get a glimpse of a romantic kindling.
Oh, see, I did, but I feel like it. I use this metaphor so often, but to me, it's a lot like one of my brother's old dogs, where she was a big dog, and when you would pet her, she would like gently lay her head on your lap,
Aww.
and then she would put a paw up, and then she would put his other paw up, and then suddenly there's a dog on your lap.
Right. Yeah.
For me personally, with that whole thing, is that I boil it down to have you guys ever heard of the love languages before?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So I boiled it down to that. So like how if you're listening and you don't know what they are, the love languages, like there's 5 of them. They boil down to saying nice things, spending quality time, acts of service, which could just be something like clearing off someone's car when it's snowing, so that it, like, if they're running late, you're helping them out.
Just taking care of things.
Gifts, like, and gifts, and I think I already said words of affirmation, but
I think physical affection or something.
touching or hugging, stuff like that.
Yeah, it basically comes down to like the ways in which we show love to each other.
Exactly. And I think that with Judah specifically, his version is just doing acts of service. And Princess Carolyn's
100%.
is saying nice things and like trying to biggin people up whenever they feel like they're down. You know, like that's why she has the Patton and Princess Carolyn pep talk about like, you need to get your shit together. Like that's how she expresses her feelings for other people. So
Yeah.
but yeah. I mean, like I was glad that they kind of tied that little bow on it, and also that Princess Carolyn decided to have 2 weddings. One was industry only, and then the other one was family and friends. But at that time, when the wedding was happening, Bojack was in prison, so he was only out for 1 day, and ended up staying with Mr. Peanut Butter. So like just
And ruining his suit.
yeah. It's just all so great. Like we'll get into that last one too, but like yeah. So
Yeah, it is a challenge to mention all of these characters, go through one by one, but not touch on how they relate to and with Bojack.
Yeah,
and
the
the
like
last.
intersections between their stories.
So we're omitting a substantial like fanfare or what do you call it, a coda for each of these characters before they. Yeah, this is just their stories outside of Bojack.
well, and I think that that's why, because the story ultimately is about Bojack, but like these players have been with them for so long, and we've seen like their entire trajectory, and it's just like it's especially for a character like Princess Carolyn, like that was the pathos I was hoping for, because I was like, for God's sake, out of all the characters, she needs a happy ending, because she had just been.
She works so hard.
She's not entirely selfless, but the whole thing is that like Princess Carolyn's overall caretaking and just wanting to do the right thing, even when she's surrounded by a bunch of people who could care less about just trying to genuinely help someone, that it just doesn't come down to their bottom line, was just like, it was just remarkable to me. Like how she still had like this decent, good heart at the end of it, you know? And she was not like, she didn't really even want all that much. She just, I don't know. She just wanted a family, and she got it. And I thought that was really, really sweet.
Yeah. She also is starting up her own studio. Like I like that she
Yeah.
I like that she
Oh,
turned
yeah,
down
that's
the smarmy turtle top. What was it called? Like the feminine
Lenny Turtle Top. It was called Girdle Top.
girdle
like,
top.
Like,
which is like
like
Oh
a
cheap.
girdle
my
that a woman
God.
would wear back in the 50s.
And it's just so hopelessly washed up and pathetic. But which is nice because they could, like, she was so close to having an evil partnership with him and just being kind of like the lackey that supports the outdated Hollywood mindset. that he
Yeah.
sort of
and
represents.
she'd already been there before with like doing the negotiations with the assistants, and it's just like I think that like PC would be like, no, this would be totally hypocritical, and also she'd been working for that kind of industry with like those kind of like male CEOs, like people dominating that position of power, that she's just like, fuck it, like no, I've proven that I'm more than capable of doing all these other things. Why shouldn't I start my own studio?
Pardon me, I might be misremembering from a different season, but don't we get in that sort of moment, like in this season, another flashback to when she was working for Bojack's first agent, and he's just like this, I mean, cartoonish, obviously, but like for a show that like treats most of its characters pretty well, like pretty realistically, like a cartoonish stereotype of like an old Hollywood executive.
Yeah, I mean, like the essential casting couch sleazy movie producer, director, whoever you want to call him.
That fucking guy.
Like, yeah, I think that was Teddy, and
guy.
that's I think that guy's name was Teddy, and that's why when Lenny was talking to her over the phone, she's like, "I'm familiar with Teddy. I don't want to talk about him. I want to eliminate any memory I have ever had of him from my brain. Thank you."
I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, he's a giant creep.
Right, and I like that it just shows the contrast between their mindset where Turtletop is just like, yeah, see, you get it. You're being tactful. You're not expressing actual dismay at having been harassed and molested and abused.
Yeah.
Like there's an important distinction that like he just fundamentally didn't get.
Hey, PC, you're a walking NDA agreement. Would you like to work for this company?
Also
Oh Jesus! But like, yeah. So I'm so glad that she got that.
Also, that he referred to. I mean, and I just made this connection that she's so PC. Anyway,
it's true. It's all right. It's all right. Okay.
Well, I'm glad that she didn't work for that guy.
I am also glad, and I think that she will have, like, honestly, those two movies that they were describing, like the one that's from the perspective of what was it? It was like Wendy and Peter Pan or something, and then there was another one, the perspective of the ticket taker from the movie booth where Batman's parents got shot. I'm like, I would love to see that movie. That sounds awesome.
But only if they wrote it.
Yeah, only if they wrote it. It's true. I just like that perspective. Just be like, well, yeah, like, what was her life after the point? Like, did they have to increase security? Like, did she ever have to like try to make a settlement with his family? Like, what happened? But, oh God. All right. Well, I guess now is good a time as any to get into Diane.
Yeah.
Number one, I'm super glad to see that she is still living in Chicago with Guy, because Guy is
absolutely.
Like, he's such a great match for her, because like for all the self-doubts and, you know, like just wanting to like make these books about trauma and everything, Guy is just like, look, I think these antidepressants are really helping you a lot. And the fact that they chose to do a Mentos parody for Diane taking antidepressants.
Oh yeah, that was
pretty
so
great.
good.
Like, she's like,
well, so that whole episode was just a lot of fun, partially because of like the Mentos thing, but also like whenever she's sitting there trying to write the book and it goes to this like childish cartoon drawing.
Yeah, like all the doodles and sketches and everything where she's like trying to just be like, my name's Diane, I'm from Boston, my dad is not from Boston, but we live here anyway. That's not good writing. Fix this later.
See,
Fix this later.
I thought that was Diane's, like the equivalent of Princess Carolyn's her episode, like her.
Oh, like the new client one where she's got like all the running things
but,
at once.
the stupid piece of shit for episode for Diane, where you really get inside their head and you get to see how these sort of demons plague them in all of these different ways and how it affects them. And I know it was kind of funny here and there, but because it's super relatable in a lot of different ways for anybody who's ever had any variation of writer's block or trying to start.
Or artist block or anything creative.
But no, actually, I thought that was actually like it's cute on the surface, but it's actually deeply troubling and sad. And how she had.
Oh, it absolutely is, right?
The whole thing is very much like stream of consciousness for Diane, which I think is what Robin was kind of getting into.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, it is. It's goofy on the surface, but I think like its ability to sort of utilize the way in which you're, like, as Tracy was saying, like the stream of consciousness where it suddenly veers off into this like dark place. I think that's really it's a good use of that sort of style.
Mm-hmm.
I like that she had she had the confrontation with Princess Carolyn at one point where she's like, I have to write this book, and it's like, why? And it's like, oh, because it wasn't really about wanting to write a book. It was about doing something to prove her self-worth to herself, and it wasn't about the book, and just being able to figure out that there's other ways that you can still find purpose without having to adhere to more or less arbitrary objectives that you've obligated
Yeah.
yourself to do as a measurement of your own abilities and value as a person. So she grew considerably, I think, in this season. And
Yeah, and not every author has to be Sylvia Plath too. It's like,
Yeah.
like there's still an addressing for like her dealing with her trauma, and that like the whole notion of her wanting to write those books of personal essays shouldn't just be about like her just using that as an outlet for venting all of her depression about like how she was raised and how shitty her childhood was and everything. But at the same time, it's like a lot of authors will try going into things like you know, I don't want to mention like J.K. Rowling, but, you know, like characters like Harry Potter are there and relatable for certain kids that like maybe, you know, they've always kind of felt like outsiders, or they've wanted to believe that there's like something like kind of special and cosmic and interesting about them specifically, which is kind of why she ends up writing Ivy Tran, Food Court Detective,
which is so
honestly,
great.
I love.
I love it. And also the fact that they chose to make the illustrations for Ivy Tran like a lot more like nuanced and colorful and bright and like interesting, you know, like as opposed to all of Diane's sketches of herself, which are just really scraggly and a whole lot of mean things she's saying about herself too.
I love that
Yeah.
her best work just came so off the cuff, and it was just natural, and it was fun for her to do. Like, it was just kind of a mental exercise. And out of all these scribbly, nightmarish Dawn Hertzfeldian characters of herself and all these people from her past, all of a sudden this beautifully rendered, perfectly colored character. It's just Dora the Explorer
Almost
her
like
way
Lisa
into her
Frankie.
fantasy.
And they also mention kintsugi, which is
Yes!
the Japanese art
Mr.
of putting
Peanut Butter Nightmare and Kintsugi
yeah,
was like,
That was so cool. Well, so this, I actually want to talk about this, and we'll probably circle back to it, but I
Yeah.
think Diane's whole thing, like, how she's talking about, like, well, you know, all these, like, all this crap, this is why I have to write these essays. I think it's a theme that I feel like they kind of, like, tease or poke at a few times in the show overall, is, like, the idea of sacrifice and what it's worth and how it works almost.
Right.
That's definitely a motif for this half for sure.
the penultimate episode, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
But another little Diane super cute moment, like what I don't know. I pick out little itty bitties. I don't know if they were meant to be throwaway moments, but I just kind of latch on to these like little bits and pieces, and I'm like, wow, that's actually really perfect, and just surmises their entire takeaway lessons from their character stories, where she spent all of this time and all of this suffering and all of this inner turmoil trying to make something with depth that had meaning, that added, that was adhering to all of her progressive principles and changed the world. And when it comes down to it, like sad stories like that, like, oh, I've conquered this sort of obstacles in my life, they're more or less, I mean, a dime a dozen. And but the moment where she like just does this like silly little kid story about this little girl that's a hero, and then this little walrus girl that comes to get her autograph,
so happy,
and she's like,
I love
think
that.
your
here you go,
braces
Emily.
look
I think your
cool."
braces are cute,
And she looks so happy, and you're like, in that moment, she is like, she accomplished everything that she wanted to.
Yeah, I'm like, Diane,
Oh,
you
yeah,
are Beverly
100%.
Cleary. Do not let this die, okay?
I think there's two things I want to bump on there. One is, like, I love that, like, that obviously is great, but I also love that, like, before that, when she's doing the copy editing, and Guy's son gets
that was so
involved.
sweet.
The guy's name
Like,
is
whatever,
Sunny.
His name is
for
Sunny.
babies, but like, does that happen?
Robin, I know what you're getting into. Please say it.
Is it the Schaumburg is
Yes.
in Chicago? She lives in Chicago, but she's from Schaumburg, Diane. Schaumburg is in Chicago. That was hilarious, obviously.
Schaumburg
Like,
is in the Chicago metro area. Like, what's next, Diane? Morton Grove, Chicago? Naperville,
died.
Chicago?
I died.
Evanston, Chicago? And that is like the most Chicago-centric reference you could do, aside from not putting ketchup on a hot dog. Because, like...
wait, what was the other one?
What?
There was one other joke in there that I have to write. Parmadillos!
Oh, no, yeah. Also, I'm a little bit horrified at how frequently that Diane goes to Portillo's. Like, I live here. I don't go that often because Portillo's is just like, it's just basically junk food. Like, it's really good, but you can't go that often.
It is just like it's just like slightly better McDonald's.
A little
okay,
bit.
much better McDonald's. But It's still just fast food.
It's like, I get that you also gain weight from taking antidepressants, but I'm like, Diane, you also go to Parmadillos a lot, so maybe take care of that.
But yeah, that was such a Chicago joke, but I love that Sonny also latches into it.
Yeah, that, like, he actually was just like, yeah, your book is good for the parts that weren't for dumb babies, because he's still a teenage boy,
like,
and he has to like punch down a little bit.
Yeah, right. He has to be kind of shitty, sure. But I also think like what I really enjoy overall about the fact that this is the book that Diane writes that actually like reaches people, as opposed to like what Kat was saying, these sort of dime a dozen like all this crap I went through and now I'm better type of
Because like
thing.
a lot of that will just boil down to like live journals, really. It's just like, I mean, that you use that for like venting. Like I'd put that in a journal, like a personal journal. I wouldn't want to put that in a book of essays because like
no.
I don't think that would resonate with a lot of people. Just be like, oh, woe is me. Like this part of my life sucked. Like just no.
Yeah, well, we did that in like back in Jack Kerouac days, but instead we get this story of this girl who. And it's what I'm getting at is like this much more sort of bright, hopeful version of media that I think is better in this story, but also like a direction we're sort of seeing emerge in some level in media on a greater level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like how dystopians are just like, it's kind of boring at this point now. It's just like, no, like I want to think that decent things are going to happen. Because nihilism is so boring to me. Like, I'm just no, it's like you have a finite amount of time on this world. Try to have better relationships with people than worse. And like, it's not about being remembered. It's just about enjoying the time that you have. Because even if you don't believe in heaven or not, like just be a decent person.
It's harder to be happier and optimistic and believe in the good of things despite lots of horrible things happening around you at any given time.
Right.
It's lazy to be negative.
It's like it takes to be happy, but it's cooler.
And it takes work to be happy, but it's worth it because it's a lot easier to go through life because then you're not just constantly worried about like oh this thing sucks, like oh I hate that person, like whatever. It's just be like, well, you know what? Enjoy the things that you can control and the people that you do have in your life. Just
and don't be Bojack.
Yeah, and don't be Bojack.
Yeah, right.
Great transition, Kat.
I think a lot of it is like, don't, be a good person because if you're only here for a finite amount and there's nothing else, why not leave something good behind?
Exactly.
As opposed to like this sort of negative legacy. But yeah, let's jump into Bojack.
So I guess the best place to start off with is just him being at Wesleyan because he leaps into it pretty easily. I think it's just something about like him just wanting to kind of have that sort of impact on like younger people or whatever.
He's tried to make a fresh start so many times, and it seems like maybe this is the time that could possibly stick, but he eventually
Bojacks it up again.
God, I'm so angry.
And it's not just like the whole thing of like he took the job at Wesleyan before he told Hollyhock, which is like just baseline lazy. Like just call her. Just ask like, hey, this position came up. I kind of want to apply for it. Would that make you uncomfortable? That's all you have to do. If she says no, fine. Maybe apply for a job elsewhere because there are plenty of teaching gigs in the world. But like just okay, there are plenty of theater teaching gigs in the world.
Maybe.
Look, I don't know that much about
academic job market, and I can tell you it's rough out there.
I don't know that much about academia in terms of job placement, but what I do know is that he could have at the very least just tried to talk to her about it because presumably they have that understanding, right?
Yeah, what he does here is absolutely the selfish Bojack thing, which is I have this opportunity and also it like puts me in a position to be closer to this person in my life, and therefore I'm going to insert myself into it.
Acting on impulse first, thinking about the repercussions after the fact. That's pretty much him in a nutshell.
Not just that, but like not thinking of the repercussions for other people.
It's totally separate from like I don't even think he factored in like going there. He was just like, oh, I get to be closer to Hollyhock, and just be like, is she okay with that?
Yeah.
Because like even before he took the job, she didn't know about the whole Penny thing. But still.
Yeah,
it's just like in general, like if you had a relative that just started working at the college or the business or whatever that you were at, like you'd probably be a little bit weirded out unless they told you what was going on. Like it'd be one thing if it was a job, but like that's kind of her place. Like she was there before he was.
Showing up to all of her games and hounding her to hang out all of the time. Like you could see where she would want to set some boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, because like she's like 19 or 20. It's like she needs to have her own life, Bojack.
She's got. Yes. I loved her. I loved her rugby friends. They were just so cool.
I did too.
And like,
yeah, they were great.
Super athletic lionesses and things. I love that. And who was the chick fan in the owl in the? At first I thought it was Wendy, and I was like, because the character design was so similar. But
oh yeah.
Because she was my favorite. I loved her so much.
Oh yeah. The Lisa Kudrow owl, right?
I was hoping that maybe she had a sister or something at Wesleyan that she was like going to support, but then it wasn't her, and I was like, oh.
No, it's just a snowy owl. But at the same time, like, I like that she was just kind of like reading Bojack the Riot Act. He's just like, do you even know what you're cheering for? Like, do you know what the plays are in any of this stuff? I don't know. Because, like, he's just kind of going there to be sort of like almost an overzealous parent that wants to show that they're very supportive of their kids' sports.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm just like, no, like, you're there to study. Like, mayhaps try to get to know the other professors better. Like, ingratiate yourself, make like a new kind of community. Don't just rely on Hollyhock. Like, that puts a lot of pressure on her.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing I think that's sort of interesting and, like, rough here, right, is that Bojack really does, like, aside from the fact that he, like, just kind of inserts himself into her life, he makes her the only person she knows and then doesn't really seem to spend a lot of time making other friends. You know, obviously he's at AA, which is good, and he obviously, like, builds relationships with his students, but he doesn't have, like... actual friends.
I did like that the students all took it upon themselves to ritualistically break into his AA meetings or like just insert themselves to show that they were good actors.
They were such just like it's so like actors to do that. They were just so cringy and like, oh, for fuck's
I'll
sake.
show you. I'm gonna be the talk of this town.
You use the same old man voice for everything.
I'm a 15-year-old boy.
I'm 28. Like, just, ugh.
But yeah, like, what resonates to me with that in some ways is, like, I have a friend who he moved to into the middle of nowhere, basically, for an academic job.
Yeah.
And has no friends. And the effect that has had on him is horrible. Like, this kind of isolation, because his support network is non-existent. He hangs out with his dog.
That's not good. I mean,
That's it.
And also it would be one thing if he would try to like seek out a group that would be like, hey, we all have dogs, or like we all, you know, we go to this dog park and just like get to meet people. But it's like, it's just like how Bojack has always been kind of intent on making his immediate social group very insular, you know, like he's a very curmudgeonly kind of dude in general.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's just like how he didn't really seek out any other peers his own age to just kind of establish that rapport, which is a little bit suspicious to me, but not out of character for him. But and also he invited PC and Diane and Ruthie, of course, and Todd all out to the, I guess, like the end of the semester performance. He's like, yeah, they all kind of suck, but I'd rather see you there if you're around. Also, the fact that having them all united together ends up going to kind of another emotional extreme, because slightly after the performance, Bojack gets a call from Charlotte. And that call is basically her telling him, like, look, whoever these reporters are, fuck off. They're like, we're not going to talk to them about anything. Because, like, they go to, like, try to talk to Penny about the whole Bojack situation. And he has a panic attack and he passes out.
They try to corner Penny. Like, they kind of do, like, this smarmy...
Oh, my God,
They absolutely, like, go to her restaurant and then follow her home.
No,
they're still being creepy.
I was pissed about that.
I mean, like, they go into her house, like, uninvited, basically.
Yeah.
No, the only part of that was okay, I mean, not okay, but worth my time, was when they break into her when they go to her house, and then Max immediately starts rooting around for liquor.
I think it's just more of like an old timey, because people can do like ridiculous crap like that in old movies, and like nobody bats an eye.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm sure that like if that was mentioned in like, you know, whatever article that Paige was trying to publish, they're like, oh yeah, we entered into Penny Carson's home uninvited and proceeded to prod her for questions. It's like, no, it's supposed to be a neutral territory thing. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they could totally be like sued for that kind of shit. You know, in the real world.
But Charlotte is such a good mom, where like
God, she's so good.
Yeah.
Where Penny was like, I'm gonna tell him, like, people need to know what a dirtbag this is, because maybe it'll stop his predatory advances on other potential girls like Guy was. But then his mom was like, yeah, but this is gonna ruin your life, because then your name is gonna get dragged through the dirt. And she didn't forbid her from doing it. She just encouraged her to really weigh the consequences of doing that sort of a thing. So
it was similar to Gina echoing her own concerns where, like, if they hadn't talked about the whole strangulation thing happening on the Filbert set, she'd be like, I don't want to be associated with you for the rest of my career. Where she's like, I don't want to be known as the woman that Bojack Horseman strangled. And like the reason Charlotte is mentioning that to Penny is that, like, and ultimately she's also right too, because Charlotte had lived in Hollywood before, and she's like, look, Penny, even if you do talk to them, it'll probably become about something else. And then the whole thing about the article about Penny ended up just becoming about Sarah Lynn.
Right.
From a journalism standpoint, it's a lot more of a juicy story than just him trying to, like, basically bet a teenager.
Do you think so we're fast forwarding the story a little bit. There was this expose that came out that Paige Sinclair posted, and it was basically airing out all of Bojack's dirty laundry. And then PC helps him set up an interview with Chinchilla. What was her name?
Oh, Biscuits Braxby.
Braxby.
Yeah.
And
she's very cute, but but she's still conniving.
And through PC's engineering and just understanding of how things can be spun in a way that helps her friend redeem himself, she more or less organizes that for him, and Biscuits Braxby lowballs him an easy out, which is so commonplace, it seems like, in Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
Like, all you have to do is seem pensive and thoughtful and remorseful and sorry.
It's like, we're gonna give you this mug so that you don't make any aggressive hand gestures, because that comes across as threatening.
Right.
Like, the entire thing is that, like, she totally treats him with kid gloves.
Right.
And it's just like, look, go through these motions, and then
But then Paige, in a total rager for having all of her work,
a page rage,
a rampage, if you will.
There it is.
Oh, you son of a bitch!
My roommate's name is Paige, and so I've had chances to workshop this already. So I can't take credit
Don't
for being
workshop
that
things
quick
in
off
casual
lookup.
conversations.
This is my
Diane.
tight five.
No. So Paige Sinclair comes back and then corners Biscuits Braxby for essentially putting her up against the wall. You're all wet, Chinchilla. We love it so much. Like, just the throwaway jokes. But do you think that Paige Sinclair cornered Biscuits
Brisby?
Braxby?
Is that what you were going to say?
I was about to say Mrs. Brisby.
Mrs. Brisby.
Do you think that her intentions were more coming from a place of, I don't want my work to look like I've wasted my time, or honestly, this guy doesn't deserve to be given a slap on the wrist?
I think it's a little of both.
Yeah. I mean, I more think that, like, Paige, like, since they're both journalists, she knew that, like, if she gave Biscuits a little bit more inside information, it would make better ratings for her, more provocative questions, and then she could also corner Bojack when he's not on the defensive.
Well, and I think also, like, I don't even know if it's, like, you know, not letting Bojack off so much as it is, like, I think there she's doing a little bit of a push towards the fact that, like, this is, like, played for laughs, but, like, she's pushing more as, like, an old school journalist versus Biscuits, which is what journalism looks like now.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, pushing back in a little bit on what journalism looks like now and how it should seek to do more.
We start off from the first one, which is more or less kind of like one of those interviews that they have on 60 Minutes, which is like just kind of like doing a back and forth and everything. Like Bojack, like appearing pensive and like trying to be genuinely sincere about how reluctant he was about everything. But then with the follow-up from Paige, like, I think a lot of that just ends up starting to frame Bojack almost like he's Charlie Sheen, you know?
Right.
Because, like, but it's also accurate because Bojack was not being coached by PC at that point because, so after the first interview, he's like, did I nail that? And then he's also totally missing the point about, like, how, like, look, do your interview, say your piece, and then we can all get on with our lives. But he gets drunk off of the fame again.
Yeah,
Yep.
And even at PC, she tried to intervene and everything, but, like, he just didn't want to listen after a while.
You're right. He's, like, addicted to fame, and so he can never just leave something alone.
Yeah, like, he needs to just kind of keep chasing that fame and, like, he just can't shut up. He can't save himself from himself.
I don't know if it was just fame this time, but I think that he was really like, oh yeah, I am a good person. See, people like me. It proves it.
He's like, look, I'm part of the conversation, because then he would be getting a lot of positive feedback, like from the dean from Wesleyan, and then just like people at Starbucks, like, oh, my manager said that you can have that drink for free because after seeing your interview, he went to his first AA meeting, which like can be good, but at the same time, then it goes to his head where he's like, oh yeah, I'm a hero now. He rationalizes it to himself after Pinky Penguin calls from the company from MBN. I love seeing Pinky Penguin.
He was back.
He's constantly on the precipice of like it complete bankruptcy.
And like the angry landlord slinking out of the room and growling at him.
That they can't steal his chairs. But yeah, like, and that's the whole thing is that like Pinky kind of plays into Bojack's ego because he's just like, hey, could you just go back on and just do some stories about like, you know, when you're having fun in Hollywood and everything. But unbeknownst to him, at that point, Paige and Biscuits Braxby had already talked. Mm-hmm. So then Biscuits is just like immediately just completely just dominating the conversation. And she knows a lot more about Bojack than he ever would have thought, like trying to figure out the whole thing with like there was a time duration that split between when Sarah Lynn had, like when Bojack had realized that Sarah Lynn was dying, basically, and then when he called the ambulance, which was 17 minutes. And like that just whole thing, like it was so calculating to me.
And good, because I mean,
yeah,
like
I mean, good. Like I'm glad that they called him out for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because like, and he immediately gets on the defensive and keeps trying to explain himself and rationalize certain things, and still like leaning on the whole thing of like, oh, I was abused, like I'm an addict, all that. But it's like after a certain point, like intentionality really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what he did. And what he did is just like how Biscuits basically breaks it down is that there's just like a bunch of systematic power struggles between him and women that happen to be either younger than him or like in a professional kind of field. It's not an even playing ground between them. And she's like,
yeah,
which I didn't totally see initially, but I'm just like, no, I guess that makes sense. I mean, like he does have this vague kind of predator mindset to him.
I like that. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because that things were no longer equal in terms of he thought things were unfair in the second interview. You know, like where did you get this information from? Who are you talking to? Like it's clearly feels like he's been. Well, it's more like things aren't stacked in his favor anymore. And so to him, that seems unfair. And I think that that's a common vibe that I get from a lot of blowback from Me Too sort of things these days, where people are. It's not so much that people are saying like, oh, things have changed now. This isn't the way they used to be. All of a sudden, all of these standards are changed, and it's not so much that things are unfair. It's just things are no longer stacked in the favor of people who've been getting away with garbage forever. So,
yeah, and it doesn't boil down to abusive men either. It's just abusive people in general. Like, people should not be treating others like that. And the fact that it had been swept under the rug or ignored that entire time, that's the problem. It's not the fact that standards have changed. The problem is that they were doing it before and thought that they could just keep doing it and not get repercussions.
And then I think that's the point that PC finally resigns to being like, look, I've done everything for you. I did the impossible and I brought your name back from certain demise, and you went and messed it up again. There's nothing that I can do to help you, and I have other, like, I think it finally clarifies for her that she has better and other priorities to get to.
Did you notice how she flinched when Bojack said that was different? She wasn't like the other girls. I love Sarah Lynn.
Yes.
And then Princess Carolyn looks hurt because it's just like, that whole thing that he said to her in the restaurant about him loving her as much as he was capable of loving anybody?
Right.
Like, was that just total bullshit? It's just like, now she gets to question everything and just be like, I've done everything for you and you're still not grateful for it. You still act like everyone owes you this shit. And it's just be like, fuck him, you know?
Her best will never be enough for somebody that will perpetually take advantage of it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that nothing will ever be good enough for him. And that's the problem. It's just like, and it's none of that is PC's fault or whatever. It comes down to him. He's setting unrealistic expectations for totally taking advantage of his friends. And they're done putting up with it.
And as soon as she divorces herself from that sort of a toxic contract of binding herself to this guy that she's tries so hard to win approval from or to fix, then it's just like everything just falls into place for her, and she finds a wonderful guy who appreciates and compliments her dreams and her goals and her work style and her family aspirations, and then she opens up her own studio and things just go great. Like once she, like everybody I think realigns their life goals in a way that benefits them and shows that they're continuing to grow up and get past the hedonism of working in Hollywood.
Kat, to echo your point, like I see what you're talking about that too, because we see a similar boundary being put in place by Diane, like in the last episode, admittedly.
Oh yeah.
But it's to me, it's the same message that like a morally dubious character like Anna Spanakopita, she had a good piece of advice, even if she was not necessarily the most like cut and dry decent person, is that when she's talking about like you may see some people that are drowning and you'll want to help them because like if you're a decent person you inherently want to do that, but you're gonna have to stop yourself because after a certain point there's some people that you just can't save.
Right.
And I think that like both PC and Diane had hit that threshold. Todd did too.
Yeah.
Because when they were going through the whiteboard of all the bad things that Bojack did in his office, Todd added those 3 things that he did to fuck
all
with
the
his
things
life.
That Bojack did
and Diane
to fuck with
added
him.
the ones on hers too, because like he's done so many things he can't keep track of them anymore.
No.
He needs
And
3 people to catalog.
Like 3 people and 2.5 whiteboards, right? Like something like that, or like
Something
at least
like
2
that. It was
whiteboards.
absurd.
They ran out of space.
It's like at that certain point, and then like eventually, like I guess Bojack gets canceled because that other interview just did not go over well at all for obvious reasons. And then he just kind of becomes a pariah to the point that the only person working to talk to him and work with him is Vance Wagner, who is just this disgusting, like shitty Hollywood dude. Like, and Robin, I know that you didn't see a whole lot of season 5, but they had one episode that was just about him being the recipient of this award called the Forgivies, which is where they basically just kind of sweep the shitty actions of bad men in Hollywood under the rug. So he was one of the recipients, and like he's the only person that will talk to him. And I'm just like, Bojack, if you cannot wake up from that and realize that the only people willing to hang out with you are some of the worst people ever, then no one can help you.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? The people who like clung on to him were like, "Oh yeah, man, you're like." You're like railing against like PC culture. It's like so
I'm
good.
so tired of the patriarchy and all this crap.
Yeah.
Like, or like just SJWs trying to fight against the patriarchy.
And what did he become? The horny unicorn or something like that? What was the character?
The horny unicorn.
Vance and Bojack were talking about that in a diner, and like you can see all the patrons wanting to get away from them. Like how
they're
he's
so
like, oh, I should be
uncomfortable.
a unicorn where like my horn is like a corkscrew, and then I just open it up and I'm just like getting drunk and shit. And like he eventually ends up
Playing that.
He eventually ends up making that movie, and I'm just be like, Bojack, this is not who you want to be.
It's the joke of what supposedly Snakes on Plane was inspired by, which was like that kind of a dumb conversation where like, what if we made this movie?
Yeah.
And then they did it, and like, except it's that, but with like
horrible people who aren't funny.
Yeah.
Well, with like Family Guy.
Yeah.
Like the dregs of Family Guy level of humor.
Like basically all those made for Netflix Adam Sandler movies, basically.
But
Like
even
that
it
caliber.
came out while he was in prison, and it comes out with positive buzz, and so it just shows you that there's always a market for trashy movies.
There's always a market for schlock as long as there's a recognizable name attached to it. Just
it's hard to sometimes accept the fact that sometimes people just want schlock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And myself included, but
I mean, like, I like some trash, but I don't like trashy people that are necessarily attached to it.
That's
you know,
and that's fair. Like Vance Wagner is definitely like as soon as he appeared, having no context of him, I was like, "Fuck him."
It's good to know that your
Get him
instincts were
out.
totally on point because he's awful. him shaming his daughter. Oh God, no, I forget what her name was, but like him shaming her for her SpawnCon post for L'Oreal, and then she's
God,
just
that was
reciting the
wild.
entire caption. I was like, oh my God. Oh, we should talk about the letter too, I think.
Yeah. So this is actually, can we like, so like, I want to talk about how it actually ends, but then I want to actually like point to some of the things that frustrated me about the ending because we don't get closure for the letter or therefore for Hollyhock.
But at the same time, his reaction says everything we need to know, you know? Like, to me, like, I get that a lot of people wanted to see him read it, but I could only assume that it was probably something that Hollyhock had to really think about for a little while, and then she's just like, look, like either he just can't take the hint, or she's just... I think she had to just be like at a certain point, like if she put herself into Penny's shoes.
When did he get the letter?
He gets the letter as he's leaving.
No,
his
as he's
house,
getting
I
kicked
think.
out by the realtor who just sold his house to a family in Ohio. Yeah.
So that was after the damning expose.
Yes.
Yeah, because he got there was a settlement with Sarah Lynn's parents where they I think they sued him for $5 million. Yeah, and I was
million.
just like, Sarah Lynn's parents are like, they're like, as bad as Bojack is, they're like the most despicable people in this entire universe. Because like selling her twerk or gotta work to twerk or something, or like I'd die for a Pepsi, like just
God,
like the most
'em.
disgusting, awful stage parents ever. Like, and we don't really get to find out whether or not she was molested by her stepfather, the bear photographer, but it's very heavily implied. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ. Like, yeah, we'll get into the second to last episode too, because that in itself is just a huge unpacking.
We should probably move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're
okay. All right.
Like,
yeah. So essentially, we don't really get a whole lot back for Hollyhock's letter, but just to wrap up the whole thing with Angela Diaz is that like basically she bluffed the whole thing about like forcing Bojack to fire Herb.
Mm-hmm.
So and then he's like, oh, I don't have any power over this stuff. She's like, bullshit, you still did it anyway.
Right.
Stop trying to give yourself that out. Then they're basically drinking at her house.
Yeah, that's the
he
thing
steals
that
her
kills
car.
me is that she gets him off the wagon, but
yeah, exactly.
that pushes him into this other situation.
He goes into a bender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he goes on another bender again. He steals her car and a bunch of horsing around complete series Blu-rays, breaks into his old house. Like, he uses her car to batter down the old Bojack Horseman gate in front of the house. And then he's just basically, he goes into the house and starts watching his screen test for horsing around and seeing how much of a good connection he had with Herb and how he just totally sold him out.
Right, and it's just so heartbreaking. Because Herb was such a good friend.
He really was.
Man.
Like, he was
100%.
a much better friend than Bojack ever deserved, and it was heartbreaking, but...
It's like Bojack doesn't know how to be a good friend or a good person. Like, he tries,
and that's the thing, it's not that hard. Like, he's making it seem like it's insurmountable. It's like, just be a baseline decent person. Don't cut someone off when you're driving. Like, don't insult this random person just to try to make yourself feel better. It's such a weak coping mechanism. Right. Like, that just pisses me off so much about him. But anyway, let's get into the penultimate episode, because clearly this is going to be, it's probably one of the runaway best episodes of the series. Like, bar none.
It was so nightmarishly horrific.
Oh, yeah. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time because I'm like, holy fucking shit. Because, like, just watching it, I had this total existential dread. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? Because, like, it was bad enough that, like, I remember, like, oh, right, this is the dream he was telling Dr. Champ he keeps having. But it's all these people that were in Bojack's life, either friends, families, just people that he had worked with before. They're all at a dinner party, but they're all dead. So, like, there's Sarah Lynn, Corduroy Jackson, Herb Kazaz, Beatrice Horseman, Butterscotch Horseman, also looking like Secretariat for some reason, but he talks like Butterscotch.
He died.
And Zach Braff is also there.
Zach Braff's there for some reason.
Yeah. Just cause. Oh, because he was also killed in the underground. But
I
don't know. I don't know why he'd be there. I don't think he was that close with him.
No, whatever. I don't think so. I think that's just a weird, like, celebrity hook for Bojack.
Yeah. But yeah, so like the entire like uniting thing about that is that he's at this dinner party with them, and they're basically all talking about their best and worst part of their lives, but before they died.
Before that, though, it's deeply symbolic because he shows up to the house and they're all chasing around this red bird. I didn't quite get what that was, but I guess that's a general superstition that if there's a bird in the house, it's a bad omen, or sometimes
I think it's
death.
supposed to be an omen of death.
Oh.
Like it's supposed to be like it'd be one thing if like there's supposed to be like an old wives' tale thing about like if you see a red cardinal, it means that it's one of your dead relatives visiting you, basically. But I think that was a red tanager, which is supposed to be a bad sign.
And then he as a housewarming present to his mother, he brings pink hydrangeas, which I was just, going down my internet rabbit hole, and apparently that particular variety that he gave her are called hollyhocks. So,
boom.
Really?
Boom. Yeah. So,
boy,
rife with symbolism here.
What a tangled web they weave. Like, and also when they get into the parlor, when he's helping them try to get the bird out of the house, there are a bunch of all those old pictures, like the original Horseman portrait with Joseph and Honey and Cracker Jack and everyone. There's also the portrait of like Bojack's picture of like the narcissist myth thing with the pool and the guy staring at him. The body that's in the pool is now a drowned body, which is like, it took me a couple times because like I had to pause and I was like, holy fucking shit.
It's so smart, but so spooky.
Oh God! And how at the dinner everyone's being served like their last meal. Like Beatrice is eating hospital food. Cracker Jack has a ration. Corduroy Jackson has the lemon that he had before autoerotic asphyxiation. Like just all of it is just God!
Jesus.
It's just rife with everything.
And Bojack has a shit ton of pills that he just finished taking.
Yeah. And it's all their last meals. It's just horrifying.
Right.
And
like the dripping is slowly filling up his lungs as he loses consciousness in this kind of semi-purgatory.
Yeah, but it looks
body.
like tar too. It looks like there's tar leaking down there because it's hot because it keeps burning the top of his head. And apparently there's one point in the dream where he's supposed to wake up just before like there's like a performance, like a floor show that goes on, and he's not waking up. So he gets taken into the actual performance hall, and it's all these relatives that are just doing certain performances. Like Sarah Lynn, she starts off playing Don't Stop Dancing from the season 5 penultimate episode, and then it transitions into Sarah Lynn doing like her weird pop star dance thing, and she's just, oh God. And then she ends up just basically jumping into this abyss that like Bojack's like, what the fuck is happening?
This door, it's just a door.
It's just a door with just endless like blackness everywhere.
It's very Nightmare Before Christmas, but without the whimsy.
Yeah, very much so.
It's like Nightmare Before Christmas if the door opened to No Face trying to consume you.
It's just Nightmare.
It was very where it was finally chasing him in the end. It was very No Facey, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. That was most of what I got from it too. But they try to have like all of them doing certain performances, like except Zach Braff, of course, which we don't see because we didn't need to.
I love the Zach Braff one though because he shoves him off the roller skates and they yells about everything he wanted to do they didn't get to.
Yeah,
which is just a bunch of like
world that started the whole Zach Braffing.
He just Austin Powers speed rolls backwards into death.
Yes. Just making
just
jokes
like,
as he goes.
Could you imagine being one of the writers and coming up to Zach Braff being like, okay, so here's what you're going to do for your character. And he was like, I'm here for this.
I mean, like, and thank God, like, most of their guest stars they're just such great sports about being parodies of themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but so he leaves during Zach Braff's thing, and then he goes to have a smoke with Secretariat / his dad, where I'm gonna say it's his dad because he just couldn't imagine his dad was so stoic and unloving and abusive. But during this last heart-to-heart conversation they have, under the guise of Secretariat, his hero, his dad finally admits that he actually did care about him, which is so multi-layered because in the end, Bojack had the best of intentions too, but it really didn't matter for all of the harm that he caused for everybody else. Like, it just didn't balance out, and it was so reminiscent of the same sort of treatment that he got from his own dad.
Well, yeah, because and like a lot of it just kind of boiled down to like him just almost like talking to himself, like not just because both Butterscotch and Bojack are voiced by Will Arnett, but also because it's like, you know, like he says, like, even though I didn't want to show it, but I really did care about you and your mother and everything. And then Bojack's like, no, you didn't. Oh, you were miserable. All you want to do is just like drink and tell everyone how sad you were all the time. It's like, Bojack, that's what you do.
Right.
Well, and this is one of those things I wonder about this. Like, is this all taking place in his head, and therefore those characters are just sort of voicing his own sort of thoughts, right?
Yeah, I assumed it was a projection. Like, that's what he'd always wanted to
right.
hear from his dad.
Right.
I got that impression, yeah. But, and then, of course, we cut to after Secretariat / Butterscotch finishes his cigarette. He's like, oh, you really don't get it, do you? He's like, and then you see that there's a bunch of cigarette butts that make up the outline of Bojack's body. So he is drowning. And this is his mind's way of trying to come to terms with his death before he passes away. Yeah. And he starts freaking out. Like, he's trying to retrace his steps and figure out like where to go from there. And it is just absolutely heartbreaking because like everyone just keeps dissolving into that abyss. And he tries to talk to Herb about it, and Herb's like, I don't think it's that scary. And Bojack's like, see you on the other side. And then Herb responds, oh, no, buddy, this is it. That's all. That's all there is to it. There's nothing else other than that.
Herb was so haunting through the whole thing because as he's starting to come to terms with the, like, oh, my God, I'm dying. Like, I have to do something. Like, he kind of morphs into this distorted, like, sit down. And then at the
Yeah.
same time, like as the characters in Bojack's head are making their grand exits, like as oh my god, like the poem that the Secretariat
Yeah,
reads
the
about
view from halfway down.
where
Yeah.
where it's a song, it's a poem about his suicide where he jumped from a bridge. And I if correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't weren't we under the impression that his dad had died in some duel, which is
Yeah.
which in hindsight you think, and it's like, oh, that's something that like an uppity old worldly mother of his would conjure a story like that. But then perhaps really like his like that he actually just killed himself by jumping off of a bridge. And this is something that he kind of more or less knew all along, but then just didn't come to terms with.
Well, and the poem also features regret too, because like when he's halfway there, he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have done this."
Yep.
Like he's like, there's so much more I could have done." And then Secretary just disappears. Like he falls through the hole, and then Bojack's like, "I need to get out of here. I remember I called Diane. I couldn't have died in that pool. I called her."
But right before he does, Herb counsels him, like where he was sort of snide at the dinner table about finding your inner peace. Not Herb, Secretariat.
Yeah.
And
Butterscotch.
then in these final moments, he's like, "It's okay. Like you have to come to terms with it." And he does his best attempts to calm a frenzied mind in its last final seconds of consciousness. And then but then he switches back and forth from being like this soothing presence of finding peace of things with just like, oh no, this is it, dude. Like there's really no peace that I can offer you. You have to make it up yourself because that's all you have. Bye.
Because it makes sense because like it takes the two extremes of Herb that Bojack knew, is that there was both like him being like a very like sage and loving and caring person to him being completely bitter and resentful towards Bojack after him abandoning him, you know? Like I think that's kind of why they were those two halves. But yeah, so then like eventually Bojack is like, "No, I called Diane. I know I got out of the pool. I had to have called her." So he runs back through the dining room back into the living room or parlor area and tries to find the phone that's in the kitchen.
With no face in hot pursuit.
Yeah, oh my God. I was like, that scene is phenomenal. But yeah, so and then he sees the same bird that was in the house before, and then she starts like oozing tar out of her eyes and her mouth, and I'm like, oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is just nightmare fuel all over again. But he calls Diane, and then he's like, "Oh, you didn't pick up. That's what happened." And I think that was just like him finding out that he can't keep relying on people to save him all the time. Like it takes him forever to learn the most baseline like messages. It's so depressing and it's so frustrating for him.
And then can I just keep talking to you for a little bit? And she's like,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's him finding his peace, I think, is just having somebody that he feels like he can talk to. And then and then he dies.
And then you hear the flat line, but then if you don't skip through the credits,
which you
will hear
because that
which
was a
you
whole
should
thing.
not. Yeah, that was the thing, because like I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then but then of course I let the credits skip through, so I assumed that like, oh, this is gonna be his funeral episode, and I'm like, oh no, it's not. You sons of bitches.
Yep.
They psyched us out. Like even though some people online are just like, well, maybe there's two endings. I'm like, no, dipshit. The message of this story is it's supposed to be hopeful. It's supposed to be giving you some kind of closure with it.
Yes.
Where it's like like he's gonna have to get some kind of consequences for this stuff. And like, yeah, he should have been in prison for breaking and entering of all things.
Supermax prison for breaking and entering seems wild though.
Yeah, but it was also just him being a pariah.
It's hopeful in some ways in that it's not just like, oh, everything's a bitch and then you die. But,
yes.
I mean, so it's hopeful as in life goes on, but it's not necessarily all sunshine and rainbows and outright
no,
optimistic
not in the slightest.
No, but I think this show is like pretty honest about that.
No, yeah, I mean, it's not like endlessly nihilistic. It's just like, yeah, it can be optimistic, but you have to work for it.
But
yes.
even then, it's also just it's not even one or the other. I don't think that it's meant to be black or white. I think the last episode that it resolves to when he comes to. When he goes to prison for breaking and entering in his own house, and then the aftermath of this whole spectacle is it's not a happy ending and it's not a bad ending. It's just continues, and that's kind of a very slipstreamy, very 21st century existential vibe but it's the way that it is. And so so he does suffer consequences, and it's not entirely fair, but it doesn't have to just be like, oh, there's a reason for everything happening, or there's
Yeah.
closure,
No, I mean, I
or
think
everybody gets their
you
just
still get
desserts.
a cause and effect kind of thing, though, because, like, he gets sent to a supermax prison for just breaking and entering, as opposed to, like, I mean, even though he did break through, the gate and destroy the glass window again,
Right.
I don't know.
And then
Just
they pull a producers where he starts directing the musical.
That was delightful.
That's the thing, is that, like, Bojack can only thrive when he's in a very structured environment.
Right.
It's like that's just kind of how he has to be, where it's like there's something about the freedom of Hollywood that is just not conducive for him.
Right. Do you think he'll turn himself around? That's what it's all about.
I'd like to believe that, but that he fell off the wagon in this season
Yeah.
just really kind of murdered him for me in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same ilk, just because I think that you're only going to get out of whatever kind of, like, help or rehab or just self-discipline stuff that you put into it. For him, I don't know, because a lot of his support network is basically gone at the end of the episode. To an extent. Well, it's more limited because, like, Diane cuts contact with him. Like, we can't get into all of it, obviously, just because we're kind of running short on time. I initially phrased this question to you guys before, and I wanted to ask this just before we close out the episode and everything. But if you were a friend or a colleague or a relative of Bojack's, would you have cut him off? And if so, what would have been your breaking point with him?
It's hard to say without knowing. I mean, in this hypothetical situation.
But, like, just seeing what he had been doing, or if you've had a friend similar to him or someone that you've known like him, what would have been the point for you, I guess?
Don't know. I mean, I would have had to have gotten something meaningful in my initial relationship with him to help delude me to continue it beyond a point where any objective person would see it as reasonable. So it's hard to say, like, it would be easier if you cast me as somebody who is already in the show. Like, if you were Diane, Kat, like, how would you still have been friends with Bojack after he had done this? Like, so
okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so, like, say if you were Diane, or, like, if you were Todd or PC or whomever.
I don't know. I feel like if I was PC, I probably would have called it sooner.
Yeah, I would have too.
But I think that, again, speaks to her, for all of her cynicism for having worked in Hollywood forever. I think that deep down she really is hopeful and optimistic and sees the best that she possibly can. And until any stone has been left unturned, then she'll still hold out for a chance that things will work out. So I find that really endearing about PC. So I don't fault her for trying to for being friends with Bojack far longer than is reasonable.
But, like, also she had been kind of trained because of, like, covering for her, like, lazy alcoholic mother who is supposed to be the maid for that rich family. But
I mean,
she ended up covering for her so
breaks
much
them.
is that, like, she's kind of, like, taking care of Bojack the same way she was taking care of her mom to me.
Yeah, definitely.
But, like, just
Yeah.
I don't know. If I was PC, I would just be like, there'd just be a certain point, like, probably, honestly, the whole thing at Elefante with, like, the best thing that ever happened thing, like, it's just, like, the inherent lack of gratitude is that, like, he just kind of is so short-sighted about getting these short-term things, like trying to get an Oscar. It's like getting an Oscar or an award does not really prove anything.
I mean, arguably, you can say PC would have been the best off if she cut ties with Bojack when she broke up with him in season 1.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah. And, like, honestly, if I was Diane, the instant that I saw that Bojack and Sarah Lynn were having a vaguely incestuous relationship, I'd just be like, this guy's out of his fucking rocker. Like, just...
I think it speaks to the general cult of celebrity. I mean, and that how long people are willing to put up with horrible
just
behavior.
Like let things go. Yeah.
I think it's a commentary on a lot of treatment that follows beloved and tarnished celebrities today. Like the first one that comes to mind is Michael Jackson, sort of a thing. Like, at what point, like, is somebody who's, I mean, and this is apples and oranges because they're not the same character. But at what point is somebody who's become so revered, do you cut ties with that? And like, it's not 100% hero, it's not 100% evil, it's a spectrum of goodness, and it's all relative. And so it's like, well, like, is it okay that he's gotten off the hook in Hollywood? No, and it's certainly not fair, but isn't that kind of how it is?
Yeah, and also like for him to just die, like that's not a message. It's like, oh, if you just keep doing like it comes across as more binary than I think it needs to be or whatever. Where it's just like, oh, you do shitty things, you're gonna die cold and alone. It's like yes, but at the same time, there's still the aftermath of all the people that you affected too.
Brilliant presentation. I loved. I mean, like it's the writing is so smart. It's one of the best shows ever. I love it so much.
For sure.
I love it
And
so
what,
much.
what about you, Robin? And then we'll wrap up just because I know that we're running out of time.
When would I cut Bojack off?
Pretty much. Or like if you were one of the characters, at what point would you just be like with Todd, like finding out that he had sex with Emily or whatever?
I think if I were Todd, it would probably be that point.
Yeah.
Because by then Bojack's like really sort of betrayed him a number of times, and so that would be emotionally very difficult for me. That would probably be the point for me if I were in Todd's position.
Like, or if you were PC, like any of whichever the characters that you identify with the most, like at what point do you think
it's
that
Todd.
you'd cut him off? It's Todd. It's infinitely Todd.
I adore Todd.
Yeah,
I also
He's
love
just
Princess
so
Carolyn.
happy.
Princess Carolyn's actually my favorite, but I think I probably, in some ways, I'm closest to Todd.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I mean, I guess that like we couldn't totally get into the whole thing of like Diane cutting him off, but like I'm glad that she did because it was what she needed to do. She just kind of knew that like after him leaving her the voicemail, she basically just like talks to him on the roof. She's like, "Why would you do that to me?" Like just trying to like put all the responsibility onto her for trying to save him. She's like, "No." This is the point where it's just like, look, I'm moving to Houston. I got married to Guy, which I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? I just want to real quick talk about how much that turn gutted me because she's like my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, if you broke them up, I'm coming to Hollywood and I am knifing you,
Diane.
Ralph whateversburg.
Yeah, no, it's just like I was just like I could tell that there must have been a reason they were hiding her hand, and she's just like twinkle twinkle, there you go, like and just
twinkle twinkle big star.
I knew that was a fake out. Like I was like, yeah,
but I was just so happy because I'm just like, oh, thank God she finally has someone that like is intellectually and emotionally on her level that will like be there to reassure her to like not freak the fuck out about things,
shit.
And to not be there to enable her to wallow like Bojack did, stuff like that.
I like that they drew the parallels how Bojack met Diane and they were sort of sitting that was their sort of secret space.
Yeah.
And I also like that they finished the show where instead of looking up at the fake stars in the observatorium with Sarah Lynn, he's looking up in the real stars with his real friend in real life. And it's something that I think that anybody who's ever looked at stars can relate to, is just the whole like, what is my place in the universe? Like, what does it all mean? Like the larger questions sort of like swimming around that never have answers. And so it doesn't give you the closure that I think a lot of people crave in narratives like this, but I think that it's an especially fitting one. And that's why I think it was really just brilliant that they just held on that for like 2 or 3 minutes, it seemed, without any dialogue at all. Like that was a really bold choice to do. So I think
it really was.
Great.
I'm going to miss this show a lot, but I'm very glad that they ended it where it did, because I was like, after the whole strangling thing, I'm like, dude, I don't know how much more of this shit I can take. Like, I just fucking hated him at the end of this. I'd just be like, dude, fuck this guy. Like, just grow the fuck up. You're 55 years old. Indeed. Get your shit together. You don't need to. Anyway, I don't want to get into another diatribe, but like just.
Well, you don't have to watch him anymore. He's done.
I know that is not true. I'm going to keep rewatching episodes, but no. But yeah, no. Thank you so much for being on this with us again, Kat. Because I know that like this is probably one of the longest episodes we've done that wasn't a commentary for a movie.
Yeah.
But there's so much to talk about.
There is.
Just
and we've only kind of scratched the surface on some bits and pieces.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, then go watch it again. Or if you haven't watched it, what the hell is wrong with you? Right. We told you at the beginning, get the fuck out. But
and make sure that you have some crisis counseling on speed dial nearby, because it's going to do a number on your psyche.
Yeah, maybe don't watch it alone.
Yeah. Well, or maybe do.
Honestly, yeah, it's kind of like Evangelion. You kind of need to watch it by yourself. But
well, thank you guys for having me on. Like this is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. It was we had you on for the first half. Like it wouldn't be right to not have you on for the second one. But where can they find you online, or any other projects you want to plug, stuff like that?
My website is same as it's been, is www.catmessing.com. I'm also on the Instas. I think I'm just cat.messing. I post stuff regularly.
Yes, you do. You put a lot of stop motion stuff up on there, which makes me very happy.
Yes, I'm working on my Wolpertinger and branching out into working into stop motion proper, which is really exciting. So it's going to be a big year.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Proud of you, sweetie.
Thank you so much, bud. Yes. Yes. I will give you updates soon. And thanks to all of your listeners for tuning in.
Sick, absolutely. And Robin, where can they find you?
As always, I'm on Twitter at lobster_writer and Instagram lobsterwriter. Tracy, where do they find you?
Thank you, Robin. They can find me on Twitter and Instagram via @TCTroush. You can find our show website, notjoannaeggs.tumblr.com. We are also on YouTube. Just search for Not Joanna Eggs. You'll see our little head logo. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks so much for listening, guys. This was an intense episode.
Yeah.
I was really getting myself like worked up. Like I felt like I was gonna go training. I'm like, nope, you're just gonna be sitting for 4 hours, stupid. So
Yep.
But yeah, okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, guys. And
Bye,
we will talk
everybody.
at you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. Our intro music is Don't Hold My Breath by Ben Briggs. The outro is Wet Dreams by Phonetic Hero. Both were found on ocremix.org. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us, or tell a friend to check us out. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Find the show website via notjoannaeggs.tumblr.com. Follow us on Twitter via @lobster_writer and @TCTroush. Not Joanna Eggs, because animation is for everybody.